The alarms were screaming before I even opened my eyes. Red light filled the cockpit. Smoke curled from a broken panel near my knee. My ship, the Marlin, was falling, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The world outside the window was not the calm blue moon I had been sent to scout. It was fire. It was streaks of light cutting across a burning sky. It was a battle I had flown straight into, without any warning at all. I grabbed the controls and pulled hard, trying to level out, but half my systems were already dead. The ground was rushing up fast, a cracked gray landscape covered in craters and broken structures. I had maybe 10 seconds before impact, and all I could think was one simple, useless thought. This was supposed to be a quiet supply run. The crash felt like the whole universe hit me at once. When I woke up, everything was ringing. My ears felt stuffed with cotton, and my chest ached where the harness had held me in place. Smoke drifted through a cracked windshield. I unbuckled myself, coughing, and pushed the broken door open with my shoulder. Outside, the air was thick with dust and heat. I stepped onto the surface of a world I did not know, in the middle of a war I had no part in. Wreckage was scattered everywhere, some of it mine, most of it not. Towers in the distance were broken in half. Trenches cut through the ground like old scars. Somewhere far off, I could still hear explosions rolling like thunder, one after another. I was alone. My comms were dead. My ship was never flying again, and I was standing in the middle of someone else's war, with nothing but a torn jacket, a multi-tool, and whatever training I had left in my head. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the horizon, trying to convince myself this was survivable. Movement caught my eye. Shapes darted between wrecked structures a few hundred meters away, tall and fast, moving low the way soldiers do when they know something dangerous is close. I ducked behind a chunk of broken hull and watched. They were not human. Of course they were not. Their bodies were narrow and armored, with long limbs built for speed, and their skin had a strange shine to it, like wet stone under moonlight. They carried weapons I did not recognize, sleek and humming with energy. Two groups were fighting across the open ground, one wearing dark plating, the other wearing pale gold. The gold ones were losing. I had crashed right into the middle of somebody's war, and it was already halfway lost. I stayed low and moved away from the fighting, sticking to the wreckage for cover. My plan, if you could call it that, was simple: survive long enough to figure out where I was, and try to find something that might get a signal out. I did not expect to find anything else. I definitely did not expect to find her. It happened almost by accident. I was cutting through a collapsed transport corridor, using it as cover from the open battlefield, when I heard something underneath the noise of distant explosions. A low sound, pained, controlled, like someone trying very hard not to make any noise at all. I found the wreck of a large vehicle, gold-plated, clearly important, tipped onto its side. Around it lay several of the gold-armored soldiers, unmoving, their weapons scattered. And near the center of the wreck, propped against a broken support beam, was someone very different from the rest. She was tall, taller than me, with a slender build and skin that shimmered faintly, shifting between deep violet and blue, depending on how the light hit her. Her clothing, what was left of it, was elaborate, layered with markings that looked ceremonial rather than practical. A crown, or something like one, sat crooked on her head, one of its points snapped off. Her eyes, large and golden, locked onto mine the moment I stepped into view. She did not scream. She did not call for help. She simply watched me, her hand pressed against a wound at her side, her breathing shallow. I should have kept walking. That would have been the smart thing to do. I was one man on a foreign battlefield with no idea who these people were, or what side, if any, I should be on. But I looked at her, hurt and alone, and surrounded by the bodies of soldiers who had clearly died trying to protect her, and something in me refused to just walk away. I raised both hands slowly, showing her I was not a threat, and stepped closer. She tensed, ready to defend herself even in her condition, but I stopped a few steps away and knelt down instead. I pointed at her wound, then at myself, then made a motion like I was helping. It was not elegant, it was not smart, but it was the only language I had. For a long moment, she just studied me. Then, slowly, painfully, she nodded. That was the moment everything changed. I did not know it yet, but the soldiers hunting her were not far behind, and the fight that had already cost her guards their lives was about to come looking for the one thing it had failed to finish. I got to work fast. My training was not medical, not really, but I knew enough about wounds and pressure and keeping someone stable long enough to move them. I tore strips from my jacket and used them to bind the injury at her side as best I could. She winced, but did not pull away, watching my hands the entire time, with something between suspicion and disbelief. Up close, I could see just how exhausted she was. Not just from the wound, but from something deeper, like she had been carrying the weight of everything happening around her for a very long time. Whoever she was, she mattered. The dead guards around her were proof enough of that. I heard boots on broken stone in the distance, and my whole body went still. Voices followed, sharp and urgent, calling out in a language I did not understand, but recognized instantly as a search. They were looking for her. I looked at the wreck around us, at the open ground beyond it, and made a decision that probably should have taken longer than the 3 seconds I gave it. I was not leaving her here. I got an arm under her shoulders and helped her up. She was heavier than she looked, weighed down by armor and exhaustion, but she managed to stand with my support, leaning most of her weight against me. Together we moved. The corridor of wreckage gave us some cover, but it would not last. I guided her through gaps in the metal, keeping low, my eyes scanning constantly for movement. Every few seconds, the voices behind us grew louder, closer. Whoever was hunting her was not giving up. We reached the edge of the wreckage and found ourselves facing open ground, a stretch of cracked earth with almost nothing to hide behind. Beyond it, maybe 200 meters away, stood a structure that looked mostly intact, some kind of shelter or command post, with walls still standing. If we could reach it, we might have a chance. 200 meters of open ground with soldiers closing in behind us. It might as well have been 200 miles. I looked at her, and she looked at me, and somehow, without any shared language, we both understood the same thing. We had to run. I do not remember deciding to move. One moment we were pressed against the wreckage, and the next we were sprinting across open ground, her arm over my shoulders, my arm around her waist, both of us pushing through pain and exhaustion, because stopping meant getting caught. Shots rang out behind us, streaks of light slicing past, striking the ground and sending up bursts of dust. I pulled her sideways, weaving the way I had been trained to move under fire, unpredictable, never in a straight line. My lungs burned. Her breathing was ragged beside me, but she kept moving, matching my pace even through the pain. Halfway across the open ground, a shot came close enough that I felt the heat of it pass my ear. I twisted us both toward a shallow crater and pulled her down into it, covering her with my body, as more shots cracked overhead. For a moment, we just lay there, chests heaving, dust settling around us. She looked at me with an expression I could not fully read, something caught between confusion and something warmer. I realized she was trying to understand why a stranger, someone who owed her nothing, was risking everything to protect her. I did not have time to explain, even if I could have. I peeked over the edge of the crater and saw the soldiers closing in, spreading out to cut off our path to the shelter. We were running out of ground and running out of time. That was when I noticed the wreck near the crater's edge, a downed support drone, its systems dark, but its frame mostly intact. An idea formed fast, the kind of idea born only from desperation. I pointed at the drone, then at her, trying to communicate the plan through gestures alone. She followed my eyes, understood immediately, and nodded. While she stayed low, I crawled to the drone and pried open a side panel with my multi-tool. Inside was a mess of components, most of it unfamiliar, but one thing was clear enough. A power cell, still faintly glowing, sat connected to a set of thrusters on the drone's underside. If I could redirect that power quickly, I might create enough of a distraction to give us the seconds we needed. My hands moved fast, splicing wires the way I had been taught to improvise repairs under pressure, hoping the same logic applied to alien technology as it did to human machines. Sparks jumped from the connection point, and for a terrible second I thought I had ruined our only chance. Then the drone shuddered, its thrusters flaring to life, and it lurched sideways across the open ground, drawing every eye and every shot toward it. It was not much. It bought us maybe 10 seconds, but 10 seconds was enough. I grabbed her again, pulled her up, and we ran the rest of the way to the shelter, while the soldiers were distracted by the drone's wild, sparking flight across the battlefield. We reached the wall and slipped through a gap just as the drone finally gave out behind us, crashing in a shower of sparks that drew shouts and confusion from our pursuers. Inside the shelter, it was quiet. Dust hung in still air. For the first time since I had found her, we had a moment to breathe. She slid down against the wall, exhausted, and looked at me with wide golden eyes. Slowly, she reached up and touched a small device at her collar, something I had not noticed before. It clicked, hummed, and a moment later a strange, layered voice came from it, translating her words into something I could understand. "You saved me," she said, her voice careful, like she was testing each word. "Why?" I sat down across from her, catching my breath, and thought about how to answer that honestly. I did not know her. I did not know her people, her war, or what side, if any, was right. All I knew was that she had been alone and hurt, and I could not just leave her like that. "Because you needed help," I said simply. "That is all it takes, where I am from." She studied me for a long moment, as if turning the idea over in her mind, testing it against everything she knew about the universe. Where she came from, I would learn later. Strength decided everything. Help was not given freely. It was earned, traded, or taken. The idea that a stranger would risk his life for someone who could offer him nothing in return seemed almost impossible to her. Outside, the sounds of battle rolled on, but for the moment, the shelter held. She told me, slowly, piece by piece, what was happening. Her people, the ones in gold, were the ruling line of this world, keepers of order, across a wide stretch of territory among the stars. The ones in dark plating were rebels, once part of her own forces, now turned against her rule after years of hardship and broken promises. What had begun as a small uprising had grown into a war that was slowly consuming everything, and today, her personal guard had been ambushed while trying to move her to safety. She was their queen, not just a ruler, but the center of an entire structure of command that held her people together. If she fell here, in this shattered corridor of a dying colony, the war would likely spiral even further out of control, consuming far more than just this one world. I listened, and slowly, the shape of what I had stumbled into became clear. This was not just a rescue. This was the difference between a war that might one day end and one that might never stop. I asked her what she needed. She hesitated, studying me again, and then told me the truth. She needed to reach a signal relay on the far side of the ruins, a structure still standing despite the fighting, where she could call for loyal forces to retrieve her. Without it, she would remain trapped here, hunted, until the rebels finally found her. I looked out through a crack in the shelter wall at the battlefield beyond, calculating distance, cover, and risk. It was not good, but it was possible. "We are going to need a plan," I told her, "and you are going to need to trust me completely." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "I do," she said. "I do not understand you, but I trust you." That was enough for me. We moved when the fighting shifted away from our position, using the noise of distant explosions to cover the sound of our footsteps. I mapped our route carefully, sticking to shadows and wreckage, avoiding open ground whenever possible. She moved beside me now, with more strength, her wound stabilized enough to keep pace, though I could see the effort it cost her. Twice we had to freeze in place as patrols passed close by, soldiers in dark plating scanning the ruins for any sign of her. Both times, we pressed ourselves into shadow and waited, my heart pounding, until the danger passed. She was quiet during these moments, watching me with an expression I was starting to understand. Trust, forming slowly, born out of necessity, but growing into something steadier. As we neared the relay structure, the fighting grew heavier. Rebel forces had clearly identified it as important, and were pushing hard to secure it before her loyal soldiers could regroup. Flashes of light lit up the ruined buildings around us, and the ground shook with the force of nearby impacts. I stopped us at the edge of the open plaza that led to the relay, studying the chaos ahead. Soldiers moved in tight formations, exchanging fire across the open space. Reaching the relay meant crossing directly through the heart of the fighting. "There has to be another way," I said, mostly to myself. She placed a hand on my arm, drawing my attention. "There is not," she said through the translator. "But there is something you should know. My presence here changes things. If they see me, truly see me, some of them may hesitate." I did not fully understand what she meant until we moved. We stayed low, using the last stretch of wreckage as cover, and when we finally broke into the open, I expected chaos to swallow us whole. Instead, something strange happened. As we crossed the plaza, moving fast but visible, some of the golden-armored soldiers ahead caught sight of her, and their formation shifted immediately, turning to shield our path instead of continuing their retreat. Word spread fast among her people, even in the chaos of battle. Their queen was alive. Their queen was moving toward the relay, and a strange, unarmored outsider was at her side, guiding her through the very heart of the fighting. I do not know exactly what it looked like from the outside, a human, running alongside their queen through open battle, refusing to let her fall, but I felt the shift in the air almost immediately. Soldiers who had been retreating began holding their ground. Formations tightened. What had felt like a losing battle began, slowly, to turn. We reached the relay structure, just as a group of rebel soldiers moved to intercept us. I placed myself between them and her without thinking, my only weapon the multi-tool still in my pocket, and whatever nerve I had left. For a tense moment, nobody moved. Then her loyal soldiers arrived, cutting off the rebels' approach, buying us the seconds we needed to reach the relay controls inside. She moved to the console, her hands working quickly despite her injury, and within moments, a signal pulsed outward, calling for reinforcement. Outside, the sound of engines grew louder, distant at first, then closer, as more of her loyal forces began arriving in response to the call. The tide of the battle shifted fully then. What had been a desperate, losing fight for her people became something else entirely, a rally point, a symbol that their queen still lived and still fought alongside them. When it was finally over, when the rebel forces had pulled back and the plaza around the relay had gone quiet, I found myself standing amid the wreckage, exhausted, covered in dust, barely able to process everything that had happened in the last few hours. She walked toward me slowly, her soldiers gathering respectfully at a distance, watching the two of us with expressions I could not quite read. "You did not have to do any of this," she said through the translator, her voice steady now, stronger than before. "You owed me nothing." I looked at her, then at the soldiers around us, then at the wreckage of a battlefield that had somehow become something more than just a place I had crashed into by accident. "Where I come from," I said, "we do not wait for a reason to help someone. We just do it." She studied me for a long moment, something shifting behind her golden eyes, respect settling into place where confusion had been before. Then, in front of her soldiers, in front of a battlefield still smoking from everything that had happened, she said something that would echo across every report, every story, every retelling of that day for a very long time afterward. "This one," she said, gesturing toward me, "walked into a war that was not his own, and walked out carrying more than my life. He carried the future of everything we still have left to save." I did not fully understand the weight of those words at the time. I was too tired, too far from home, too aware of everything I had just survived to think much beyond the next breath. But standing there, in the settling dust of a battlefield that had somehow spared me, carrying a queen I had never expected to meet, in a war I had never meant to be part of, I understood one simple truth. Sometimes, the difference between chaos and hope is just one person deciding to help, even when nothing about the situation makes sense, even when the odds say to walk away. I had crashed into someone else's war, with nothing but a broken ship and a stubborn refusal to leave someone behind. And somehow, against every reasonable expectation, I had walked out of it carrying a queen, and with her, the first real chance her people had to find peace again. That was the day I learned exactly what a single choice, made in the middle of chaos, could change forever.